Hi, this is Vinny from the iMoot team. It's my pleasure to introduce Scott Huntley. Scott works for Pukunui based in the Sydney office. And Scott, this afternoon, this morning, this evening, whatever time zone you're in, will be talking to us Bootstrap hacks for teachers. So thanks very much, Scott, for presenting again at iMoot17, and I hope you all enjoy Scott's presentation.
Well, thank you very much, Vinny, and yeah, it's my pleasure to be here. So let's get started. Hi, I'm Scott. I'm a trainer and consultant for Pukunui, but in addition, I'm also a part-time teacher for TAFE New South Wales. I teach web topics. Well, not just web topics, but that's my primary occupation. So I teach HTML and CSS, and so I know all kinds of tricks about that. And one of the things that I know about is this thing called Bootstrap, which is kind of like a web language type thing. So HTML is not all that hard. And in this particular presentation, we're going to get into some of that. So there's a little preamble. We got to go through a little bit of this HTML and CSS before we can actually get into Bootstrap. So all you really got to know, and I did my best to try to take out as much technical jargon as possible inside here. So I'm not going to tell you what HTML even stands for. All you really need to know is it's about the content of a web page. So HTML is the language that the content is written in. And what I mean by that is everything a page says, all the data, the bones, the skeleton of the page. CSS, again, don't worry about the jargon and stuff. It's not even a language. It's something else you don't need to know. It's how we define the style of a page. It's how a page looks. So if you think of it kind of like a book, the words on the page, that would be HTML. The fonts, that would be CSS. So I promise HTML is not that hard. Here's a little bit of HTML we can learn right here. This is how we'd actually make a paragraph in HTML. And yeah, okay, I put up computer code in the middle of an iMoot discussion, but it's not that hard. It shouldn't be freaking you out. It's not that hard. So here we go, and I'll talk you through this code. That P tag up at the top, that P with the brackets around it, we call that a tag. That's the start of a new paragraph, and then same thing, but with a slash in front of the P, that's the end of a paragraph. It's that easy. And everything between that open and close, that's the paragraph. That's pretty much all you need to know about HTML. So CSS, similarly, it's a little bit more complicated to sort of explain where CSS goes, and because CSS doesn't really fit the same mold as HTML. I'm not going to really even bother telling you all about what it is and where it goes and all that sort of stuff. I'm just going to tell you about inline CSS. And now here's where I take off my hat as just a Moodle guy, put on my hat as a web design teacher. As a web teacher, I have to tell you, CSS, inline CSS is terrible. Never use inline CSS. That's the worst possible way to put CSS onto a web page. Inline CSS is wrong. It goes against everything CSS stands for. It's blasphemy. In fact, it deserves its own slide. Never, ever, ever use inline CSS, except when I take off my web teacher hat and I throw it away and I say, hey, I'm trying to create a Moodle course. This is the best time to use CSS, inline CSS, because there's no other way to put CSS into our web page. We got to use inline. So don't worry about the old cranks amongst us who are saying never use inline CSS. It's fine. Don't worry about it. So where do we actually put this inline CSS? Well, remember that paragraph that I was talking about? Here's the same HTML, and this time I've added the technical term as an attribute to the element. Don't worry about the technical stuff. We usually just call this a tag as well. So we've just added this tag here for the style, and we've just set a style is equal to color :red. And that just means we're going to take all those words and we're going to show them in red. So that paragraph is all going to show up as red. So Moodle is a website, so you're probably wondering, where's the HTML and CSS in Moodle? And yeah, it's easy to find all this. We can go take a look at the HTML for a typical iMoot page. So I went back to the course page, and I right-clicked, and I viewed the source, and I took a screenshot, and here's the code for that page. There you go. Easy to understand, right? Simple. Yeah. Very simple, right? I'll just... my slides, are they not progressing? There's supposed to be a don't panic page in here. That's fine. I've caught up. Don't panic. I said don't panic as I panicked because my slides didn't work. Don't panic. Don't worry about all this crazy code there. The reality is that as web pages became more and more complicated, there's my don't panic. Don't panic. The reality is, as web pages became more sophisticated, the code became more complex. And in order to keep up with that code maintenance, these days, 95% of all websites you visit, a computer program has written the code. There's still that 5% that some web design teacher stickler is doing by hand. But most web pages are actually done by a computer program. And in fact, that's what Moodle is. We might have heard all kinds of things about what Moodle is. It's an LMS, Moodle is a system, Moodle's a revolution. No, it's not. Really is what it is. It's a computer program that writes HTML. That's what it is at its core. And Moodle can write some pretty awful HTML. So, a more useful place to find and edit the HTML in Moodle, instead of looking at that right view source, let's just start off simple. Let's just add a label. So you know what a label is? You just go, we're going to add a label. It's just a little block of code. Brings up the Atto editor. Maybe in some systems it's still bringing up TinyMCE. That's all right. I wrote this one for Atto, so I'm sure you can find it on TinyMCE as well. So up comes your Atto editor. You put in, here's a paragraph, something like that. And this first button here, I call this the kitchen sink button because when you press it, you get everything in the kitchen sink. You press that. And then this last button over here at the very end, the one with the two brackets, that brings up your HTML code. So there you go. That's the HTML right there. And it looks pretty much the same as what we had. There's a little bit of garbage there because I pressed enter at the end, and so that's converted that enter into HTML as well. That's what I mean about the awful HTML that freaks out the web teacher. Don't worry about that, though. Slide is behind. Are you guys a slide behind? No? Okay, I'll keep going then. Yeah, I think that I just had one little freak out spot and we're all trying to catch up. Okay. All right, so if you want to learn some HTML, yeah, go for it. Anybody can learn HTML. It's a pretty easy language. The worst place to learn it is probably where everybody goes to learn it, W3 Schools. I hate W3 Schools. It drives me nuts. That website absolutely totally drives me nuts. Don't get me started. We could put on another entire session about Scott Rants. But it's an easy address to remember, and it's mostly okay. There's a couple problems with it personal problems that I have. So that's where a lot of people start to learn from. And there's not a lot of other resources that are really great to give to an absolute beginner. So there it is, W3 Schools. I hate W3 Schools, but I'm telling you to go there. So what is Bootstrap? So we've talked about HTML, we've talked about CSS, but the title of this presentation is all about Bootstrap hacks. So what is Bootstrap? Well, there's a nice technical term, technical definition, Bootstrap's a framework, blah, 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 blah. It doesn't really matter. I'm not going to talk about the technical stuff. Basically, it's a quick way to add some style to a web page without writing too much HTML or CSS. And it's very popular. It's been used in Moodle themes. It's been used all over the place. So a lot of people love Bootstrap, and they're incorporating it in all kinds of places. And yeah, Moodle themes, there's some popular Moodle themes that are using Bootstrap as well. So for instance, Boost, which was the new default Moodle 3.2 theme, that uses Bootstrap. And I got some technical details. They use Bootstrap 4. And you might have visited the session done by Gareth. Gareth, he's the maintainer of Essential, very popular Bootstrap theme. So yeah, I had to mention that one as well. That's not all. There's a ton of themes that use Bootstrap, and there's a link right there. If you do that, you'll find all the themes that you're searching for, ones that include the word Bootstrap in it, and it's going to be a ton. So how do you actually use Bootstrap? Well, at its simplest core, what you do is you go into that HTML, and this time we're going to add a tag called class, and we can just put in an appropriate class. So in this case, I'm going to put in a class text-danger. And what that does, that's going to take that paragraph and it's going to make it show up in kind of a reddish color. And yeah, that's pretty much it. So there you go. That's using Bootstrap, sorry. That's using Bootstrap, and that's how you would actually do it. Now, I know some of you are thinking, well, how do you know what all these classes are? I'm going to show you some of them, and I'm going to show you where you can find more. But that's it. So yeah, there's some documentation at getbootstrap.com. That's the official Bootstrap site. Go to getbootstrap.com/CSS. That documentation is awful. It's so bad that I'm generally directing people back to W3 schools, and I hate W3 schools. But it's written very technical, and it's very hard to sort of understand. And they start that page off with a section on grids, and for a lot of people that totally throws them. So if you do go to that page, what I suggest, if you're an absolute beginner, skip that grid section. Go down to a section called Typography. That's where you want to start and learn about the typography, and eventually go back up to the grid stuff. And again, with the W3 schools, I always think start with the typography. That's probably the easiest stuff to understand. So let's take a look at how we could actually use Bootstrap. And we're going to do this through a case study. So my first case study, I titled this one, I got a jerk for a Moodle admin, and my boss still wants me to produce something pretty to introduce students to their facilitators. So let's pretend you have a jerk for a Moodle admin. He, she, or they may have locked down the Moodle and totally locked it down. They're not going to add any custom CSS. So you call them up, hey, we need to add some custom CSS styles. And they're like, no. They're not going to allow us to change the theme, even though you could just change the theme for the course or just the category. You assure them you can do this. They're like, no, I don't want to change the theme for the whole site. And your boss is like, look, the course isn't pretty enough. You have to make it pretty. So what are you going to do? Well, if you know some web design, you can get around all this. And there is a small chance that this was based on a true story, but I don't want to give away too many details about that, and I probably totally exaggerated. So let's start by adding a label that we're going to introduce the teaching. That's a great, I've got a typo. You're going to introduce the teachers, the facilitators, with a prettied up profile picture. You know, a little HTML, CSS, and Bootstrap. And you can probably just, even if you didn't, you could hack together these pieces. So the very first thing, we're going to add a label, and we're going to include the teacher's details as usual. So I've just added a label there, and I just figured instead of doing an actual demo, I'd just do this through screenshots. So I've added my label, and I've put in some details about the teacher, the facilitator, and then I've just added a picture. Now, I'm going to tell you square pictures work best because I'm going to add some Bootstrap, and you're going to find that if you use a square picture, it's going to be better results. So I've put in a square picture of the facilitator right there. And I've gone into that button, and I've gone to the HTML button, and up came this spaghetti of code. Yeah, okay, it's a lot to try to piece together what starts where. It's just, boom, thrown at you. Don't panic, because you're just going to go through one at a time, and you're going to separate this code. This is an optional. You don't need to tidy up this way. Now, I know some of you are going, look, I don't know any HTML at all. How do I even know what to tidy up? Yeah, it's total gibberish. I don't even know where to start. What if I wreck everything so people aren't even necessarily comfortable tidying up the code? That's okay. I got your back. Go to this website here, dirtymarkup.com. Now, I know that this is a dubious sounding name. Some people think it suggests something else entirely. I'm telling you, trust me, please. It's safe for work. It's not one of those sites, okay? You go to this site here, dirtymarkup.com, and you're going to copy and paste that code from the Atto editor, and you're going to put it right here inside here on the right part of the page. You're going to paste your code right there. And then you take your HTML that you've got there, and you go down to this part here. Now, this is really important. Make sure that the output there says code fragment. You don't want to make an entire web page of this. So by default, it's like assuming you're making a whole web page. You want to make just a fragment. You're just making a piece of a web page. And then you hit this button here, clean. And it's going to go through and it's going to reformat your code, and it comes up all pretty. And that's all you have to do. So it's tidied up the code for us. So we highlight all of that again, copy it, and paste it back inside the Atto editor. And there, we've tidied up the code. Now it's at least readable. Now we can actually start to see where things are. The next step we want to do, we want to find the image tag. Now, even if you don't know HTML, it's a pretty good guess that img tag is image. And if we take a look at it, it starts to make sense. Yeah, that looks kind of like an image. That's the address of my picture. It ends with a .jpg, so that's my picture. So we've identified where the picture is in that HTML. We need to add a class. So I told you about Bootstrap. The easiest way is by adding those classes. So if we go take a look at that code, that tag, we see that it already has a class. So what do you do if it's already got a class? Oh, sorry. Yeah, Marine. Don't. I don't want to get too bogged down in the technical term. A class is just kind of like it's adding an additional thing to the tag. It's giving it a classification. So it's kind of like a role, almost. You could think of it. So we're going to add this class to our tag. And now it already has these classes, but yeah, we could. Next slide. Come on, next slide. Don't die on me, slide deck. I want to go to slide 36. Okay, yeah, you can always add another class. So just like those roles that we talked about, yeah, you can have more than one role in Moodle. You can add more than one class inside an HTML tag. So we're going to add another class, and we're going to add the class image-circle. That's going to take that square picture and turn it into a nice circle. And you can find out about this class on W3 Schools. That's where I found out about it. Well, no, I found out about it on the Git Bootstrap website. But yeah, W3 Schools, that's where I went today when I was preparing for this. And yeah, if you go back and turn back into the turn off the HTML view and look at it, it looks pretty nice right there. That's the picture of the professor inside a nice circle. Now, that's cool, but can you wrap the text around the picture? Well, of course you can. So we go back into the HTML code, and we're going to add a little inline CSS. I acknowledge there's a couple different ways to do this, but I'm the web guy, so I'm comfortable using CSS. So I'm going to add a style tag. Remember, we add CSS, inline CSS using the style tag. And in this case, I'm going to use some CSS called float left. That's going to take the picture and it's going to take it and move it kind of like a float out to the left and allow the text to wrap around it to the right. I'm going to add some padding as well. So the padding is just going to add a little bit of white space around that picture. And there we go. Very nice. Very nice. So what if we want to add another tutor? Well, we can repeat the process. I'm always doing this. I just duplicate my previous label. And then I'm going to edit the clone. So I'm going to go in, I'm going to change the text, I'm going to change the picture. And I go back into the HTML. Now, it turns out when you change that picture, Moodle is going to rip out that image-circle class. So I'm going to go back into my classes. And in there, I'm going to put that image-circle class back inside those classes. And I'm going to change that float left to a float right. So it's going to look a really neat sort of effect. We're going to have one on the left, one on the right. And I've got this slide duplicated for no reason at all. And we turn off the HTML, and there we go, looking very nice. So now when we look on our page, we're on our way to starting to have a really nice looking course page. So that was just sort of like the first sort of case study. I mean, obviously we could keep going through and do this with a lot more elements on our page, but I just wanted to start with something simple. Just some labels to make it nice and pretty. So now that you kind of know how to use Bootstrap, what kind of Bootstrap classes are out there? Well, I didn't want to list every single possible one because we'd be here for a long time, but I just thought I'd put in a couple inside here. So let's start with pictures because the pictures are the easiest ones. And I'm going to warn you too, it's not just classes. We can also use tags as well, but let's just start with some image classes. So the image circle is going to make a nice little circle around there. Now, you see what I mean about why I think it works best if you keep a square picture. Because if you have a picture that's a landscape or a portrait, it's going to do its best to curve it, but it's going to look more like an oval, and I think that kind of looks bad. This image dash rounded, it just takes a normal picture and it rounds off the corners. Image thumbnail puts a little kind of like a thumbnail effect around this. A slimming? Yeah, maybe. Some typography Bootstrap. So this is actually a tag. It's not a class. You can use the HTML tag small, and typically you'd use this inside a heading. And what it would do is it adds like a little bit smaller secondary sort of text to the heading. And in most cases, it's going to be a different color. Now, I tried this on the iMoot site, and it came out, it was all the same color. You got to keep in mind that theme designers, when they write the themes, they have the ability to override the Bootstrap classes. So probably what happened was in this theme, it's overridden some of the bootstraps. So that's another reason why you have to test this on your dev site, see what happens. You might have a good idea based upon W3 Schools or getbootstrap.com what it's going to look like, but you're never really sure until you actually test it inside your theme. So that was pretty easy to do. You just added that small, and then you wrote a little bit more text inside there, and there you go. There's a tag called mark, and this does kind of like a highlight effect. Now, on this particular, on the iMoot site, it actually comes up orange. I was expecting it to come up more like a yellow color, which is more like a highlighter color. Oh, it's all right. The orange is fine. And again, to do that, just in the middle of my paragraph, I just marked off some words with the mark tag. This one I think is a really cool one. The KBD tag, that's like keyboard, and it kind of gives it this computer sort of look. So if you're telling students that they have to press a keyboard combination, I think that looks really nice. So that one's really easy to do. Again, you just use that KBD. And there you go. You just put a couple words inside there. You can also use these contextual colors. Sometimes, well, they're designed to add context to text. But some people, they just want to use it just to change the color. I don't think you need to, I mean, it was designed for context, but yeah, you can kind of just use it just for appearance reasons. Please don't make a rainbow page. That's really a bad idea. I'm begging you as a human being, one human being to another, please do not make a rainbow page. But yeah, inside there, again, you just use either text muted, text-primary, text-success, etc., etc. Again, test this out because it doesn't always work. And yeah, I just went into my paragraph, added that class, and put in that particular class inside there. There's also contextual backgrounds, and that just puts a white text on a nice background. I don't know, it kind of doesn't look right, but yeah, I mean, you could give it a shot, give it a try, give it a play. And yeah, it's the same thing. You just give it a class of BG background. BG, I should say, it wasn't BG background. BG is the background. BG dash primary, BG dash success, etc., etc. Striped tables, I think this is a really neat one. I think it really improves the look of tables to add the striped tables. So this is just like a table where you've got every second row a different color. Really easy to do. Really easy to do. Flip slide, flip slide. Oh, I don't know what's wrong with my slides tonight. Okay, so yeah, it's really easy. We just go in and we just find the table. Now, Moodle generates weird-looking tables, and they're big and huge and cumbersome. Just look for that first line, the one that says table, and inside there, add your classes. It's a little weird. You have to add a class called table to a table, but that's just the way Bootstrap works. You add that table, and I added one table-striped. It gave me that effect. There's a couple other table Bootstrap classes out there. I just went with the table striped, but yeah, take a look at W3 Schools or the Get Bootstrap website, and you can find a couple other neat table ones. There's a thing called label. Labels work, but I had kind of mixed success with them. So the idea of a label is it just adds like this little tiny word, or well, you could actually make it really long. Probably works best with just short little words, and it's just kind of like a label, just kind of like an additional hint. So, for instance, this new case works really well. You're just saying, hey, this is a new thing. And you can actually use contextual colors. Now, I tried it with a bunch of different colors, and you can imagine it's the same contextual colors that we saw before. There was primary, success, info, warning, danger. I found that success and danger don't work in the iMoot site. So, like I said, that's where testing, trial and error comes into play. But yeah, if you wanted the orange one, that's a label-warning. And again, really easy. We just go in, we write some words. Now, in this case, I used the span tag. Span, yeah, I don't want to get into technical details here. Span is just like a nice, if you want to add just a class without like putting it into italics or putting it into bold, just use just span for just a couple words. So yeah, we just put in span class and then put in our Bootstrap classes. And wells. You can add a well. Well works really well. Well works really well. That's great. A well is kind of like a, you're just marking off like a sort of like a section. So it works really well if you're putting in like, hey, here's a note, some additional, maybe a warning when you go to do your homework, make note of this and that, and et cetera, et cetera. It's a useful way to draw attention just at the top of a section. So really easy, we just added the well class. So now that we know some Bootstrap, or we know like a little tiny bit some of the classes, I thought we'd take a look at another case study. Now in this case, we're going to be talking about hyperlinks. So I think that, yeah, hyperlinks work well. I mean, they do what they do. And if you have like a big paragraph of text and halfway through you've got a word and you want to make that a hyperlink off to something else, yeah, that works great. What I'm talking about here is they look lame when you've got a section that's just like almost like a paragraph on its own that says, click here to read so-and-so's blog. I think that always looks lame when the entire like sentence is a hyperlink. Maybe in that case, make something looks more like a button. Wouldn't that be great if we could actually just use a button? Oh, excellent. Yeah, so let's add a button. And when we go to do this, resist the urge to add a URL. Now, I know that everybody, that's they're adding a hyperlink, that's a URL, right? No, I think it works better if you actually add a label, and we're going to put the hyperlink inside that label. So we've added a label, I've typed in a few words, in this case, visit this blog, and I've highlighted those words, and I went to create a link by pressing on the chain, put in my URL, and there we are. That's how we create a hyperlink, right? And then after we've got our hyperlink, we're going to go view the code. So there's the code there for our hyperlink. Now, I don't want to talk too much about the HTML again. I'm trying to get away from the technical definitions, but that's our HTML code there that actually makes a hyperlink. And at the end of it, we're going to add a class. Now, in this case, we're going to add the classes of BTN, that's short for button, and we're going to add a BTN-default, and that's going to control the color. Now, that would be fine if we just hit enter there. We could just work with that. I'm going to tell you that I took this off the W3C site. Role equals button. That's going to help us with the accessibility. I don't want to get too bogged down with accessibility. We all know about how important making stuff accessible is. Really, we should have a talk on it. I'm putting it out there. Somebody should do an accessibility talk in Moodle for iMoot 2018. So I'm not going to do it. I'm going to avoid the topic. That's my way of acknowledging accessibility without getting bogged down into it. If we turn that off, we've got a nice little button there, and if you press that button, you'll be sent off to the other site. So we've taken a boring-looking hyperlink, and we've turned it into a nice button. You can even change the color of it. So I use button-default. If you use button-primary, it would come up with this blue, button-success, there you go, button-info, etc., etc. There is an Atto plugin to make buttons. Ah, there we go, somebody's thinking. Yeah, so we can actually change the color as well. Again, a lot of people would think that, we got to worry about the context. We should only put in a danger button if it's a danger. Don't worry too much about that. Pick the color that you want. Again, don't make a rainbow page. Case number 3. I wasn't actually going to do this one. I did this at the last sort of minute. As I was going through preparing my slides for this, I came across this one section inside there. And like I said, I think it's best if you start with Bootstrap, start with the easy stuff, just the simple stuff, the typography, the tables, the buttons, and so forth like that. You know that that's going to work. Some of the more complicated stuff isn't going to work. It's designed to work on a web page on its own. So if you go take a look at the slide, the carousel, that's going to be really kind of tricky to get it to work inside Moodle. I'm not saying it's impossible. I'm just saying, just as a beginner, it's probably going to be a lot more to hack. But then I saw this one thing here, and I was like, I wonder if you could actually do this one. So yeah, it works out that you can. So I'm going to tell you how to hide away some stuff. So it's a bit of a tricky one. This is a way to deal with the scroll of death, although there's plenty of ways to deal with the scroll of death. I'm not saying this is a be-all, end-all. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take a little bit of text on a page, like a label, and I'm just going to make it so it's collapsible. Really easy sort of stuff. Again, I'm going to just keep it really easy, just a paragraph or a photo or something like that. Nothing really too complicated. So I'm going to write a paragraph here. I'm even going to include a picture. So I've written my little paragraph. I've included a picture. Again, I go into the HTML. And there's this big bunch of spaghetti code there. This time, I'm not even going to bother trying to figure it out. I'm not going to even bother tidying it. To me, it's just a blob of code. Don't worry about it. It's a blob. Next slide. Come on, slides. My apologies. It's a huge slide deck, and that's why I think it's slow tonight. Yeah. There we go. So we've got our blob of HTML code. I'm going to add a div around that. So what's a div? A div is just it's a division of the page, and it's just a generic box. You don't even need to worry about it, what it actually really is. It's just a division of the page. So we just add a div up at the top, so div, and a div at the end. And now I copied and pasted off the W3 Schools some other code here. I'm going to explain what some of this is. So the first one, that first attribute, that first tag, ID, that's setting an identification. So that's kind of giving this div like a name, an ID. And in this case, IDs have to be unique, so they can't be repeated anywhere else on the web page. So I gave it an ID initially of Galactica because I was like, what's the chance that anywhere else on the web page they use the word Galactica? And then I was like, you know what? I should make it double sure that it's unique. And I encourage this. I prefaced it with my initials. So I put KSH-Galactica. Guaranteed. Nothing else inside that Moodle page is going to use my initials plus this random word. The next couple things there. Class, you know what that class is. And in this case, it has to be a collapse. Again, I just copied and pasted that off of the W3 Schools site. This one here, the REIA, area expanded, that's an accessibility thing. Again, I just copied and pasted that. I could kind of probably figure out what it means, but I'm not even going to worry about it. Up at the top of that, I'm going to add a button. And again, this is code that I just copied and pasted. You know what? It's been so long since I've actually added a button that wasn't a hyperlink that I would be stretching my brain to add a button off the top of my head. But yeah, so I just copied and pasted a button. It's not that hard. It's just button. And I put in some text inside there between the start and end. I added a line break by accident. So I've got my button that says Battlestar Galactica. Now let's go through some of the attributes there. That data-toggle collapse, again, I just copied and pasted it. I can guess what it's saying. It's saying that it's going to turn off this collapsing. The data target, this is the important one that I want you, that's the one I had to change. That's the one I want you to make note of. That's where we actually put that data target is the same as the ID of what you're trying to collapse. So that's where I used KSH-Galactica. And you put in a hash in front of it. So you're saying, look for that thing, that div with that ID. That's what we want to collapse. Again, we put in the classes, and these are the Bootstrap classes again. You have the BTN, the button. I picked the info color. Collapsed came with it in the code, and I was like, yeah, sure, keep it as collapsed. And again, we had that area expanded, that accessibility thing, and I was like, don't touch that. We turn off our HTML view, and there we go. There's a nice little button. And when you press that button, it collapses. Now, all these case studies and demos that I did, if you go back to the course page, I've actually included them all inside there. So if you go take a look at that after the presentation, you can press this button, and you'll keep expanding and reducing the content. So you can actually see a live demo of that. Some takeaways. So what's the actual takeaway for this session? The first thing I want you to take away is that HTML is not the scariest thing in the world. It's a lot of computer programmers don't even like to call it a language. It's that easy to understand. You can all learn this. I promise you that if you start in with some HTML, you're going to pick it up pretty quick. You can edit the HTML in your Moodle course anywhere there's an Atto editor. You'll find the View HTML button, and you can go in and take a look at the actual HTML. You don't need to know everything about HTML to start editing a little bits and pieces. You just need to know a little. So don't be afraid to give it a go. That said, definitely start inside a sandpit. You don't want to do this on your live production course. Not yet. Another takeaway, CSS, you should never use inline CSS in the real world. But when we're just playing around, when we're doing stuff in Moodle, really, it's the only way that we can add this sort of stuff into Moodle easily. I mean, there's other ways you could go in, you could write the custom CSS for Moodle and all this. But if you're just a teacher on your own, this is the only way you're going to get CSS into Moodle. So don't be afraid to do it. Don't worry that it's going to make grumps like me upset. Just do it. Do your thing. If you have access to the HTML, you can start adding Bootstrap classes, provided your Moodle is running a Bootstrap theme. If you try all this and it's not working, it might be that you don't actually have a Bootstrap theme, in which case it doesn't matter what you type, it's not going to work. And all the Bootstrap classes are not necessarily going to work. Like I said, the theme developers, when they develop this, they have that ability to go into the CSS and they can edit that and they can turn off stuff entirely. So you got to trial it, you got to test it. But yeah, it's a good place to start. Again, the simpler Bootstrap usually works. Rounded images, I've yet to find a place where somebody has overridden the rounded images. And it's such a neat effect at such a low cost, you might as well start using it. Same with the typography, some of that neato stuff. Just start using it. And the button hyperlinks, that's really cool. And it's so cheap, so easy to do. So you might as well try it. Get creative with your course. Take a look at that Bootstrap website, either the official one or the W3 Schools one. And yeah, start trying to get some ideas of what you can do to make your course a little bit pretty. Just because you don't have access to the theme doesn't mean your hands are tied behind your back. You can actually get in there and do some cool stuff. And thank you very much. So we'll throw it open to questions. I know that there was a lot of stuff in the chat as it was going. I always try not to pay attention to the chat because usually that bogs me down. And Dot, you got me there with this pay $300. I don't know what that was a reference to, but I was talking and all of a sudden I saw pay $300. You're going to have to explain to me what that was. So I'm open to take questions either on the chat or on the microphone if you've got this. My slide's back. Oh, okay. And yeah, sorry about the slides. It's like 88 slides in the deck, and that's probably why it was having a little bit of trouble keeping up. So sorry about that. Ransom. Oh, you're killing me. When it died on me, I thought I'm dead. Thank you very much, Stefan. Thank you, Maureen. Oh, thank you, Matthew. I hope that everybody got something out of this. Thank you, Sue. Any issues with mobile browsers or older browsers? Mobile browsers probably shouldn't be an issue because Bootstrap plays pretty good with. Bootstrap is designed to play really good with mobile. Older browsers are going to have a lot of issues. Depends upon how old are we talking? IE 8? Yeah, we're good. It's going to die. But you know, it's designed to fail gracefully. Any good CSS will fail gracefully. And probably that's what will happen with this sort of stuff. So I wouldn't say it's a major issue. I might say, though, you're not going to get necessarily the effects you're looking for. Oh, excellent. Thank you very much. Thank you, Ian. Yeah, that's great that I love that people have got the courage to get started because, yeah, you know, Moodle is there for you to play with. So yeah, don't be afraid to get in and play with the HTML and add some inline CSS. We hate IE so much, we wouldn't let our users anywhere near Moodle with it. Yeah, but there's a lot of institutions that they will not upgrade because they've got legacy systems. I was at a school where we had IE 10 and they were not upgrading it, and it was a bit of a nightmare. Yeah, IE is the cause of a lot of evil in the world, but that competition, that cold war between IE and Netscape, it was a terrible, terrible thing, but it also drove a lot of development inside there. So it was like it bogged up a lot of. There were some dark days, but I really I love how the community that war caused everybody to adapt web standards, and we've got the wonderful world of just web browsers that we have today. Hospitals don't upgrade, as some medical systems are running old versions, running old versions of Windows. Yeah, we saw what happened with the WannaCry there. Yeah, that's definitely, there's a legacy problem there. If you're doing Inline CSS are multiple fluorescent marquee tags going in the opposite direction. Okay. Oh, Mike, please don't. You're like the one person who's like, we need a blink tag in the Moodle Auto editor. You know what? I bet you'll. I'd be impressed if you could find a marquee tag working.
I'm just going to jump in here, sorry, and just say thank you so much, Scott. This is Wendy, by the way. Thank you so much for presenting for us today. That was just awesome. We've learnt so much from it. I think I'm going to agree with Dot and start this rainbowness and have all these wonderful pictures. I was just saying, it's awesome. I understood so much. It was fantastic. Thank you, Scott, once again.
Thank you.
And everyone, don't forget, if you have any more questions for Scott, that he does have it on his forum for this particular session. But you can keep going. I'm just going to jump in here. It's just my family's coming here, and you know how it is, and everyone's about to start barking and running in the door. Okay, thanks all. Bye.
Thank you. Thank you. Oh, that's fantastic. Thank you. Thank you very much, Maureen. I love that feedback. And thank you, Stefan and Ian and Mike. Thank you very much. You're excellent crowd. Thank you, Stuart. Everybody have a good iMoot.